You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. The mobs were still in the streets when the first proposals were made to change the way Cincinnati chooses its police and fire chiefs. Proponents insisted that Cincinnati would benefit by a rules change that allows candidates from beyond the Cincinnati Police and Fire Department, as well as internal candidates, to be considered. 3.5 months later, Council has just begun to formally debate several competing proposals. 12 News reporter Jeff Hirsch prepared this story last Monday as background.
Cincinnati Police Chief Tom Stryker is, like many of the chiefs before him, a West Side Cincinnatian. He does have strong support at City Hall, but the riots have made the chief's office, if not necessarily the chief himself, a lightning rod for criticism.
It's essential for change. There's nothing symbolic about it as far as we're concerned.
Right now, both the police chief and the fire chief are picked by the city manager from among the top 3 scorers on civil service exams. The proposed amendment would let that search go coast to coast, not just Western Hills to the East End.
All it does is broaden the pool of candidates. And when you broaden the pool of candidates and we can go across the country, have a nationwide search for a police chief, and possibly bring in the best available candidate, then we've done nothing but better the agency.
One argument in favor of the change, bringing in an outsider with fresh ideas, someone not beholden to local friends or interests. Another argument, diversity. Going nationwide makes finding a black chief more likely. But the fire chief, Robert Wright, was selected under the current system. And the highest-ranking African-American police officer says leaders chosen under this system have served the city well.
Now, we've been pretty fortunate with the chiefs we've had. The current chief has done an excellent job. If you just go up the road, the city of Cleveland has had 6 police chiefs in the last 7 years.
Still, Twitty says a nationwide search for quality cannot be bad. And with the post-riot sense of needing to do something, changing the chief selection process may be one something which is doable.
On Monday evening, Council met for 4 hours to discuss 5 proposals relating to civil service reform. 2 have been made by City Manager John Shirey, 1 by Pat DeWine, 1 by Minette Cooper, and 1, which is a variation, by Phil Heimlich. Council member Pat DeWine's proposal gives power to the mayor, without the advice and consent of council, to appoint a 5-member civil service commission. The commission would have the authority to make changes in the civil service system by a simple majority vote of council rather than by the voters through a charter amendment. Unclassified positions would include all department and division heads, all deputies and assistants, and all management employees whose employment by the city is based on special experience or expertise, including housing and economic development positions. A competing proposal has been submitted by Vice Mayor Minette Cooper. Under this plan, only the police and fire departments would be impacted, and within those departments, the selection process would change only for the chief and assistant chief positions. These offices would be unclassified and no longer subject to competitive exams. The appointees would serve at the pleasure of the city manager, but after 6 months in that position, the person holding it would be entitled to a hearing before being fired. To discuss these competing proposals, I am joined by 3 people. Pat DeWine is a Republican member of City Council. Minette Cooper is the city's vice mayor and a Democratic member of council, and Dan Radford is the president of the AFL-CIO Labor Council. Everybody, welcome back to Newsmakers. As you know, and we've discussed, I want everybody out there to know, we tape on Friday mornings. This is going to be seen on Sunday, and overnight last night there was another shooting involving, in this time, a police officer and a suspect, and that person was killed. We know very little at 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning about exactly what happened, but certainly all of this has been done in the backdrop of the last few days of exchanges between FOP President Fangman and the Reverend Damon Lynch about when police should shoot. Charlie Lucan has sent a letter to Reverend Lynch trying to clarify this. So here we have another shooting in the general background of the riots, but now also in the immediate background of this exchange about when the police can and cannot shoot. I want to ask you, what's your reaction to this latest shooting, and what do you think it really says?
Well, I think it's tragic anytime that someone is shot, and we don't know all the facts, but my assumption is that this officer is a hero. It looks like this guy was shooting at him with a shotgun, with a pistol grip. This officer went out there and defended himself. From what I can tell, I'm going on that assumption. Here's a police officer that's been shot at 2 times in the last month. There's something seriously wrong when we allow that to happen. That's why I believe strongly that we have to go out, put more police on the streets. I introduced legislation yesterday which will allow us to dramatically increase the number of police officers on the streets. That's what we need to do. There's something, we can't have police officers being shot at all the
If
time.
I understand correctly, that proposal was to increase the amount of overtime that is possible for the police department so more officers can be on the street. Is that correct?
Right. What I want to do was to increase the number of police officers as quickly as possible. The way to do that quickly is to do it through overtime rather than, I also think we ought to be going out and recruiting and hiring more police officers. A city that can spend $6.5 million, as some people want to, on fixing up a sack store, certainly ought to be able to spend the money to keep our streets safe.
Minette, what's your reaction to the shooting? And then I'll ask your reaction to this proposal, but what's your reaction to the shooting?
I think it's tragic. I think it's very unfortunate. We don't have adequate information. I got the same information Pat had, that the officer had been shot at twice. I certainly feel that it's incumbent upon an officer, it's his responsibility to take care of himself. So I think from the information I have, he did the appropriate thing. Beyond that, I just can't have any information.
What about this proposal about increasing immediately the number of police on the street by increasing the amount of money available for overtime that Pat introduced yesterday?
I think that I can accept that. As I've been thinking about that, and I've been reading in the paper that the feeling is police officers have been holding back. If that is true, then I think before we increase the number of officers, we need to have them come forward and do their job. I'm perfectly happy to spend more money to increase the visibility of police. I believe visibility is an important piece in this. When police officers are seen, less things happen. But I'm not prepared to increase the number of police officers with visibility and not ensure that the officers that are already being paid are not doing their 100%.
Let me just ask a procedural question. When something like this happens, do council people get direct calls, and who calls you to give you information so that you know what's happening?
Greg Baker called me at 2:51 this morning and told me all of the information about that he had available.
Okay. And is that...
I think generally the safety director tries to call the council members and let them know what happened.
So that's the standard procedure, all council members?
Standard procedures, all council members.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's, not putting that side completely, but that's backdrop. Let's move on to these proposals that have been made about changing the civil service system and changing the way. Pat, your system, your proposal is much more expansive, much more thorough than some of the others. Why propose such a sweeping change? Or do you see it as a sweeping change?
Well, what I believe fundamentally is that city government doesn't work. Whether it's a problem people have with seeing the lack of development in the city, just look across the river, watch Newport and the levee go up, and the most imaginative thing that our city bureaucracy can think of is $6.5 million for a sack store that's already there. Or whether it's the inability of people to get basic neighborhood issues addressed. City government does not work. This city spends more per capita than any major city in the state of Ohio, and we get less results. There's something fundamentally wrong with city government. It's not something that is fixed by just by targeting the police chief, trying to blame the police chief for the riots, making the police chief a scapegoat. There's something wrong with the entire city bureaucracy. We ought to be dealing with that issue, and that's what I'm about.
Dan, what do you think about this much larger proposal of not just dealing with police and fire. We'll get to that in a minute, but what do you think about Pat's proposal?
Well, I think most of the proposals out there are not well thought out. They don't have the facts. And I think the public hearing last week, before it was disrupted, certainly showed that. I agree the city can improve, and I think that we should look at all commissions and you know, to see what changes are warranted. But I don't think the police chief should be a scapegoat. I certainly don't believe all the city workers should either, and that's exactly what's happening. Let me give you a very concrete example. Pat mentioned regarding economic development. Now, what does that have to do with civil service? You know, I hear the city manager and others indicate if we could just hire the right people and the development officers, everything would be fine. But the fact is, for the past 10 years, they have went out and hired whoever they wanted to from whatever area through the exceptional appointment process. I personally think we have a good system. Should it be reviewed periodically? Yes, but not in a sweeping change to really you know, actually dismantle the system. That's wrong.
Let me make something clear. As I read material that you gave me, the Civil Service Commission, as it now exists under state law, can provide exceptions so that the city administration can go outside this normal process, and they can sort of look nationally, and that in fact you have given lots of exceptions. And I don't have the exact, I thought I had them. 1999 it was something like 63 exceptions. In 2000 it was in the same neighborhood. Yeah. So you do give exceptions. So you're saying that the tools already exist to accomplish what's necessary?
That's correct. In addition to those numbers are 56 classification covering several hundred people. That's on the automatic exceptional list. In addition, there's many testing that's done open to the public where everyone competes. And in fact, they would have the choice of 10. You know, when we use that process, it's
rather than just
normal.
the
top one
yes.
or top three.
Pat, why is this a structural problem, as you're suggesting, or is it a failure of this administration to appoint the right people to begin with? And therefore, what we're really looking at is a failure of Shirey's office and the top administration to accomplish what's needed.
Well, as you know, I'm not a big defender of the city manager, but
hard to find anybody who is.
But what I will tell you are the last 3 city managers of the city believe very strongly that the system is broken, have advocated strong civil service reforms. Jerry Newfarmer, the head of the Charter Committee, has been part of our group working on civil service reforms, because it's not just this city manager, it's every city manager. The bottom line is we are the only major city in the state of Ohio that still completely follows the state civil service rules. Dan says, well, if the city manager asked the Civil Service Commission, and Dan, which is the head of the Civil Service Commission, if he asked the commission, headed up by the head of the AFL-CIO, for permission, sometimes they will let them go out and hire people from outside. You shouldn't have to go through that kind of bureaucratic rigmarole to hire the best employees. We ought to be able to hire the best throughout. And what's not mentioned is, for example, take the Neighborhood Services Department, which we want to declassify. There's an employee in that department who can't account for $912,000 that was wasted on one of these nonprofits. The money's just simply gone. The city manager tried to demote that employee so she wasn't in a management position. The Civil Service Commission said, well, you can demote on one level, but you're still a manager, still gets paid only $6,000 less. We have to have accountability in this city. There's something wrong with the city where there's no accountability.
Dan, I want to give you a chance, and I want to get to Minette's proposal.
You know, number one, that particular case, the city just simply did not prove the case, and they weren't, demoted. In fact, the city has prevailed on something like 70% of the appeals that has gone back, come before City Council. Number one, we have home rule, and we don't go strictly by state law. The only difference is, instead of making it strictly political and City Council changing the rules, the voter changes it. Just several years ago, we went to the police chief, choice of 3 instead of choice of 1. I think workers, not only is it good business practice, but also, You know, workers should be separated from the political process. With Pat's proposal, you cannot even identify who they really meant to be exceptional. Are we saying when a new mayor is elected that over 200 people will be terminated without any type of protection? That's wrong.
I want to come back to that, but Minette, your proposal is to focus on the safety departments, the police and the fire, and broaden the ability to search just in those two departments and just at the top administrative levels. Is it that you disagree with Pat in theory, or you just want to take a first step because you think that's doable now and you're willing to open up the possibility of moving on to other city departments later on?
First, let me say that this came up because of the unrest we've had, because I've been on council 5 years and 15 people have been shot and killed. That indicates to me that we need to look at something. In giving an overview of what has happened, we have a police force that basically have come from the same school and that have had the same indoctrination. I am very, very confident and comfortable that we have a good police force, but I think we need to have some new ideas. This is the only way we can have that opportunity. I would like for us to have the opportunity for the manager, and I think the manager would be the appropriate person, to go nationwide and try to identify somebody that he thought would add something to our system. That is not to say that he should not look within our police force, but we should have that opportunity. If you keep doing things the same old way, you get the same old results. So I'm thinking that if you have an opportunity to infuse some new thoughts, some new leadership, you can get possibly some different attitudes. Because the chief is...
But why not support Pat? Pat's proposal would accomplish that for all the departments, not just police and fire.
Well, but I think as Dan has said, we are the neighborhood housing person comes from other places, economic development person comes from other places. I think we need to focus on what is our biggest problem at this time. Okay. And right now, this is our biggest problem.
Okay, I need to take a break, but stay right there. Stay right where you are. We'll take a break and come right back and continue this discussion. Welcome back. We've been talking about these different proposals. Dan, would you support Minette's proposal, which just focuses on fire and police, or do you oppose both of these proposals?
I think in the city that the public, they want to see a change. And if you recall from day one, whether or not it was the ministers or others, they were looking at the police chief. I don't think the issue right now is how you hire a police chief, but how you fire a police chief. I don't think we want to get in the same situation as Cleveland, which Colonel Twitty indicated, where I believe 6 police chiefs in the past 7 years. I certainly think that limited to the chiefs would be and go forward that the public would really support.
Well, when this was on the ballot a number of years ago, 1997, as I remember doing reports on that, and as I had to study the issue, it wasn't the hiring question so much, it was this firing question. And as you raised, Minette, does this mean that in Pat's proposal, all kinds of people would be subject to being fired every time we had a change of mayor? Pat, what do you say about that firing end?
Well, what I say is we need accountability, and I'm only dealing with 190 people.
190 additional people, right?
Additional people. I mean, so it's a small number. It's the top decision makers.
How many people already are unclassified?
There's 164 currently that's unclassified, and I don't believe anyone really knows the numbers. I don't think the city manager knows the numbers. And
you mean about how many would be added?
That's right.
Well,
we can posit 190 though. Let's just use it as an argument.
But Pat, compares Cincinnati to Dayton and Cleveland, Columbus. The fact is, in Columbus, with 6,800 city employees, they have less than 100 unclassified.
And how many city employees do we have?
We have something like 5,900.
And that's part of the point. Here's Columbus, a city that's twice as big as we are, but has the same number of city employees. One reason they're able to do so much more with less is they don't have this kind of bureaucratic system, which makes it impossible to eliminate positions, which doesn't allow you to go out and hire the best people. We have a system that's so bad that encourages more bureaucracy.
Well, Pat, you're certainly reading and talking to different people than I'm talking to. The fact is they have less than 100 unclassified.
They go down just as far as we do. They have less departments. They have less departments because they don't have this kind of system, which allows them to consolidate departments because
civil service, and you know it or you should know it, has nothing to do with departments.
Well,
that is something the city managers should do.
The reason the city managers don't consolidate departments here is because of these rules, which say that if you consolidate departments, you can't exempt division heads. If you could exempt division heads, you can consolidate departments. You could have more unified bureaucracy, which is what we need.
That's simply not accurate. If you understand the system,
I understand it well. Charlotte, which is doing much better than we do, they don't have a single unclassified employee outside of police and fire. The proposal we're talking about only is the tip of the iceberg. It's a very
Would your goal be to unclassify everybody?
No, I think we're going to focus on just the top.
No, not now, but would your goal ultimately be to unclassify everybody?
No, I wouldn't want to unclassify the people who go out, the line level employees. But I do think when we're talking about managers who make $80,000, $90,000 a year, there's nothing wrong with making them unclassified and making them accountable.
I think that we need this conversation we're having with people who are aware of the information is very back and forth. How are we going to let our public get enough information to make a decision that is comfortable and good for the city? I think that it's reasonable that we put this to a vote, and I think it is important that as we put something to a vote, we make it clear enough that the electorate is aware of what's going on. And because this is such a broad brush, it changes so much, I don't think we can be successful at doing that.
Should this be a major issue in this year's mayor and council races?
Well, I don't know if it should be. I think it will be.
Okay.
But I think it is important that people know before they vote for something what they're voting for and the true ramifications.
Dan,
it should be an issue. People need to be able to decide whether the people running for mayor and running for city council are for reform, if they think the city can do better, or if they just believe that we should stick with the status quo.
Dan, Dr. Winkler commissioned.
Dr. Winkler, former president of the UC.
President of UC commissioned to study all charter changes, including civil service, several years ago, and their conclusion that there should not be sweeping changes. I agree with Pat to the extent that we should look at it, but I know I'm nervous, and I believe the public is nervous here when we are changing our form of government to a stronger mayor, and even Pat's proposal to increase the number of commissioners and have the mayor appoint them without the advice and consent of council.
Yeah, why do that? Why have the mayor appoint? Why appoint? And let's leave aside the 5 versus 3 for a minute. But why have the mayor do the appointments and not even have advice and consent of council?
Well, I think either we're going to have accountability in this city or we're not. We have a directly elected mayor. Why not give that mayor the power to go out and implement his or her agenda? I mean, we can talk about the new mayoral system, but let's give that mayor some authority.
Okay.
And this is something that's done in a number of other cities in Ohio.
Is that the way it's done in other places?
Well, I can only say this. There's not another major city in Ohio that has more than 3 commissioners.
Cleveland has 5, Dan.
And I think too that I don't know of any commission, and I'm told there may be, that is appointed without the advice and consent of council.
The majority of the major cities in Ohio do that.
That's
Minette, I want to come back. We have less than a minute left, but I want to come back, Minette. You said in talking about your proposal, talked about the police chiefs coming from the same school. We all know that means Elder High School, and we need to diversify that. Are you saying that the problem right now is Stryker?
No, absolutely not.
Then what's the problem?
I think the problem is that we just do not have any new ideas coming forward. It's not
Are those
Stryker.
new ideas possible to come forward from Cincinnati can?
Possibly. I mean,
have we heard anything from them about this issue?
I haven't yet. I've heard they're talking about it, so I'm waiting. But I mean, my idea is that in all circumstances, you go out and try to look for the best. Why wouldn't we do that with the police officers? And that's not taking anything away from the officers we have, but it's certainly saying new life can bring some different responses and possibly some good things.
Well, obviously we're at the beginning of this discussion. No place close to the end. Election day will get us there. Thank you very much, and
Thank you, Dan.
You'll be back on this
Thanks,
one.
Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.